All right, let's try this again. The Pittsburgh Steelers have traded for Seattle Seahawks wide receiver DK Metcalf. I'll share my reactions next here on Bleav in Steelers. Today's episode of the Bleav in Steelers show is brought to you by BetOnline.ag. The madness is here. Conference tournaments get underway this week. We're a week away from Selection Sunday. Get in on the action over at BetOnline.ag. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right. DK Metcalf is a Pittsburgh Steeler. He will come to Pittsburgh in exchange for a second-round pick, and the Steelers and Seahawks are swapping 6th and 7th-round picks. And the Steelers are going to sign Metcalf to a 5-year deal worth $150 million. That's $30 million per season. That's the price that you have to pay for premium receivers in the NFL. Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, the top-level receivers make north of $30 million, and that's only going to continue to increase as the salary cap also increases. If you're Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, it makes it a heck of a lot more intriguing for 2025, considering you have both Metcalf and you have George Pickens. You have two really good targets, and you fill a void. And the Steelers will shift draft strategies now because receiver's not going to be as big of a priority now that you have Metcalf, who's 27 years old. He's played in at least 15 games every single year in his 6-year career. He's a 2-time Pro Bowler. And I know he's coming off a season where he didn't have 1,000 yards. You also had the emergence of Jackson Smith-Njigba in Seattle, Tyler Lockett. But the Steelers get in on the mix, considering the fire sale that Seattle had. They traded away Geno Smith. They cut Tyler Lockett. New regime, new guard in Seattle. So if you're Fields or Wilson, if you're Fields, let's say, do you want to go to one of the New York teams that have been disasters? Or do you want to come back to Pittsburgh where you've got at least two guys that are going to give you the best chance of success in 2025? And if you have a good 2025, maybe you can parlay that into another year to start. Or do you want to go to another team? Do you want to go out to Seattle, which has now been decimated, and it's been a fire sale in Seattle? Credit Omar Khan and company for getting into the mix. But because you're going to allocate $30 million per year to to DK Metcalf, that to me signals that this is the last year that George Pickens will be in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform. Steelers are going to pay him between $3 and $4 million per year, but if you're paying Metcalf top-level money, you can't also pay George Pickens top-level money because you need other positions, other areas of need on a roster of who are you going to pay the big bucks to, and they're going to do that to Metcalf. Now, Metcalf does get penalized a lot. He's also a bit mercurial, a little bit after the play, but it's the size and speed. And what I'm talking about isn't even an offensive play for Metcalf. Go look at the chase down that Metcalf had against Budda Baker several years ago. 4.3 40 speed at that size and that speed, a matchup nightmare for opposing cornerbacks. So you fill a huge void because you would have had to go with the receiver in the first round. And I'm talking about maybe Emeka Egbuka, maybe Luther Burden. Now you don't have to do that in the first round, and you could go get a defensive tackle to help restock the cupboard because Cam Hayward's 36 years old, and this defense falls apart if you don't have a sound A-gap, B-gap. Maybe you go cornerback and get someone opposite Joey Porter Jr. in the draft. That's something I also think that the Steelers could address in free agency, something that Brian Batko told us about on Friday's edition of the show. Look to see what happens with the start of free agency now. Maybe you go get a running back in the draft. It's a deep running back class. It's a deep defensive tackle class. I don't want to see the Steelers go with the first-round pick. I know Hampton and G&T are the two top guys. Boise State out of G&T, and then North Carolina with Omarion Hampton. But now the Steelers can go do other things because they've addressed this need at the receiver position. I still think they draft a receiver to get more depth, but there's not that same pressure on a rookie receiver because with this offense this last year, it was George Pickens and everybody else offensively for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I really like this deal for Pittsburgh because you get someone who's 27 years old, and for the next 5 years, you're going to get solid level production. More than 1,000 yards in at least half his seasons in the league. DK Metcalf's been a very productive player. He's also stayed healthy. He's never played fewer than 15 games in a season. So you know what you're going to get with him at the receiver position. And outside, to me, this signals how Andy Weidl helped build the Eagles. Stout offensive line. You've invested draft capital. Broderick Jones, Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick up front. Sound running game. And then the two beasts on the outside, you had A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in Philly. Now you've got DK Metcalf and George Pickens on the outside. Starting to build the Steelers in the same way, a lot like the Super Bowl Eagles. Now, I'm not saying the Steelers are going to go win the Super Bowl, but that's how they're building this roster at this point. And you talk about blue chip players, and I'm going to land here. Steelers haven't had an offensive player as an all-pro, first-team all-pro player since 2017. You had Le'Veon Brown, Antonio Brown, and you also had David DeCastro up front. True blue chip difference-making players on offense that would start for other teams. And that is how you have success in the NFL in 2025 and beyond. Those difference-making players. DK Metcalf is a very good player. Not sure he's quite elite, but he helps improve your roster that's in desperate need of playmakers. He brings that ability to the Pittsburgh Steelers and his nose for the end zone. The size, the speed, the physicality. Some of the, after the penalties, that will need to be addressed. That can be coached. Kind of has a little bit of a mercurial nature, a lot like Pickens does. But at least for a season, that should be a really fun tandem to watch, regardless of who the quarterback is for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Blockbuster trade with the Seahawks. Look, I just wanted to share my reactions here live on Bleav in Steelers. We'll get to what Yin's think, and I'll wrap it up here because we have a big week ahead with the start of free agency. So let me get to some comments here. Kevin saying, here we go. Kevin asking, I was about to ask what we aim for in the first and third and how it impacts GP. To me, GP is going to be in the final year of his deal, but he doesn't have that same negotiating leverage that he would prior to this point. Because going into this year, I would have said, look, playing for what, $3.8 million this year, maybe you even hold out to go get your money right now if you're the Steelers. Steelers just spent that money on DK Metcalf. So long-term, I don't think GP has the same. I think this is going to be his final year in Pittsburgh now. That's what this move signals to me. And I know you got a first-round pick and a third-round pick. Maybe the Steelers trade down from 21 to get another pick back with another team. If the guy that they really want at 21 is there later in the first round, maybe you trade back here. And that's where I wouldn't want to overdraft a running back, whether it's Hampton or at G&T. I don't think G&T will be there by that point. Maybe Omarion Hampton would be. But maybe you could trade back here because you still have defensive tackle, corner, and running back are really the positions of need, assuming either Wilson or Fields comes back this week, which we'll know here with the start of free agency. Let me give you got one more comment to get to. This come from Joker saying, does this move solidify a wrap up for Russ? Does he stay now? The Steelers will have one of the two, whether it's Fields or Wilson. I don't believe everything on Twitter of, oh, it's a done deal and Fields is gone. I'm not of that thought process. At this moment in time, I still think it's going to be Fields. They'll prioritize Fields. And if not Fields, then it'll be Wilson. It's going to be one of the two. Because really, it's a bridge to whoever the next quarterback is for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you give the quarterback, whether it's Wilson or Fields, their best shot in 2025. But we saw what that could be this past season. Be good enough to maybe get you into the playoffs again. To go win a Super Bowl, though, that's a whole nother conversation. A lot of people checking in here live on Bleav in Steelers. I apologize for the technical difficulties earlier. But it's a really exciting move for the Pittsburgh Steelers in acquiring DK Metcalf from the Seattle Seahawks. And what this means for this team moving forward, I think maybe you trade back and get a pick back, get a second or maybe another third rounder back if you're Pittsburgh. I wouldn't want to overdraft a running back. I'm just of the thought process that really no running back should go in the first round. Maybe my thought process is antiquated what we've seen with what Saquon Barkley did in the playoffs this last year. But that's my mindset of running back, defensive tackle, and corner are still areas of need. Now you can go address those because DK Metcalf helps fill a void that was abundantly apparent this last year. There was George Pickens and everyone else on this offense. Now, if you want to bracket Metcalf or Pickens, it's kind of more of a pick your poison game. And again, that's exactly how Andy Weidel helped build the Philadelphia Eagles. I credit Omar Khan and the Steelers front office for making this move because it helps improve your offense. And again, I don't think DK Metcalf is quite elite, but I think he's a very good player. And hopefully, his best football is ahead. If you're paying him $30 million a year, you expect to get very good to premium level performance. And I think you're going to get a really, really solid player in DK Metcalf for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Want to thank all of you for checking in. Again, live reaction. Apologies for the technical difficulties earlier. My name is Mark Bergin. I want to thank today's presenting sponsor. That's BetOnline.ag. On Apple and Spotify, please leave us 5-star review on Bleav in Steelers. Tell your friends about this show, and we're going to have plenty of content this week with the start of free agency this week. The negotiating window starts Monday. On Wednesday, 4 o'clock Eastern time, players can officially sign with teams. So there's going to be plenty of news, including too, and I'll leave you with this too, Myles Garrett, $40 million per year to stay in Cleveland. What that's going to mean for TJ Watt, who's entering the final year of his deal, looking what Max Crosby got. But then remember what Max Crosby got from the Raiders, Joey Bosa, the Chargers got rid of him. So we're going to have a free agency frenzy here ahead this week, league-wide, and we're going to keep you covered here on what that means for the Pittsburgh Steelers here on the Bleav in Steelers show. My name's Mark Bergin. Have a great rest of your weekends, and I cannot wait to see you this coming week. Until then, take care. So long, everybody.